Again, thank you everyone, and my apologies for that. 21 days to a stronger, fitter BCM program. The way that this presentation came to be is actually when I was working with a client, and I'm going to go through that in a second, how that came to be. But so many times in our programs and what we see today, it's very clear a few things. One, we don't have as many people as we'd like to have in our programs to make it as effective and efficient as we'd like. We don't have enough money in many cases in order to implement the right strategies or solutions or the testing and or to even work with our third parties. And lastly, and again, we deal with either the lack of management support or the lack of employee support. So it's always trying to figure out how do we work with all of these constraints or opportunities and again, get us quickly to where we need to be. So with that, that's kind of what we're going to talk about. How do we do that using an approach that I got asked to do on the fly by a customer? First and foremost, I'll give you a quick background on who MHA is. MHA, we've been in business for 18 years. Prior to this, I was a regional vice president with Bank of America and had the entire southwest region of the United States. Since starting MHA in 1999, we've grown over those years and now are a global consulting firm with clients across many parts of the world. We focus on, again, having very highly experienced individuals, as well as combining that with a number of tools we've created over the time, not just for the use by MHA, but more importantly by our clients and other subscribers, which includes BIA On Demand, our compliance tool, and our residual risk tool. Our pedigree of clients has truly made us who we are today. We're very blessed to have a very distinguished list of clients. We've learned a lot. We've learned which clients, again, simply want to check the box. For example, those that make BCP or BCM a true part of the culture of their organization. Those where management truly supports, and those where, again, it's in between. But as we start to see the trends today, again, it is really business continuity is really becoming key. It's really being integrated with information security. Both programs are having to align not together, but not only just together with themselves, but also with physical security. So we see a whole lot changing in the business continuity management environment. And I think over time we all do want to move to resiliency. But we have a ways to go there. We're still really in that continuity phase. There are a few organizations that are really looking to move to resiliency. But one of the reasons I'm going to talk about today is how do we get past it quickly? How do we move by utilizing a process that allows us to get there quicker, faster? This just gives you a quick idea as to our services. I won't talk much about this, but this gives you an idea. MHA does end-to-end, always has. We're accustomed to being dropped in at any one of these phases in order to produce a working business continuity management program, the key being working or executable. So here we are. It's very important. I was at a client recently, a prospective client, and I, of course, had my PowerPoint ready, had everything ready to go, and one of the questions was, before you get to your PowerPoint to explain how you were going to respond to this proposal, we'd like to see how you'd answer this question. And they basically explained I had about 10, 15 minutes to answer the question. The question was, if you ran this program, you had 21 days to plan a plan or show marked improvement over time. From the time you had the 21 days to plan for it. What would you do? And if you don't do it well, you're going to get fired. So think if all of you on this call today got called in the office and say, hey, we're going to give you 21 days to plan out how over, let's say, 60 to 90 days you can show marked improvement in your program. What would you do? And I got asked this question on the fly, and after getting out of that presentation, I thought it was one of the best questions, because I think a lot of us in business continuity, we need to think this way, because I think with the lack of resources, the time we have, the money, the commitment, in many cases, we really have to figure out where should I focus my efforts on. With as complex as our organizations are getting, we really need to be focused on lean concepts and really need to figure out, again, what really is going to bring back the biggest return on investment, most importantly, reduce the most risk. So I thought, okay, well, I'm sitting there, I'm standing up, I got to figure this out on the fly. So I needed to figure out quickly, where am I going to focus my efforts on? What methodology am I going to use? And most importantly, what should I seek to correct? And they gave me the time to think about it. So here's what I came up with. Not necessarily as concise in this presentation, in that point, because it was on the fly, but I've now had time to refine it. So I went back to one of the key things that I always tell folks to do. It's called the API, or Assess, Plan, Implement, or Evaluate. A process all of us do every day, we just don't know we're doing it. So the first thing I told the client was, well, let's use the API approach, which again is Assess, Plan, Implement, Evaluate. And it's a way to quickly, when you're in an event or a situation, how to make sure that, again, you assess, You plan out what you need to do, you implement it, and you evaluate how you do, and you move forward. So I said, okay, well, let's take a look at assess. So I thought if I had 21 days to plan with 90 days to then show marked improvement, I would first assess. And I would take a look at what are the biggest risks to response, recovery, and resumption. Making sure, again, we really do focus on those key critical path items of our business continuity program, which is, can I respond effectively? Can I recover what I need to effectively? And can I resume normal business? And only focus on those key risks to those three key items. Secondly, what's my plan? What's my executable plan to attack those risks in those three key areas of response, recovery, and resumption? And making sure, again, we stay focused on those and those only, and not necessarily 100 different risks, but those risks that if we can address, maybe not 100%, but if we can even address at 80%, will bring back a very significant return on investment. The third item, again, is implementation. How do we take that focused action and steps to resolve the risks? One of the things that I see with a lot of programs is because there are so many risks or gaps to identify, it's really hard to take a step back and go, let's reduce that number. Let's really get it to what we know is core or to the value of our company and fix those. So taking that focused action. And then most importantly is evaluating. Is once we've assessed, we've done the plan, we've implemented, evaluate. How well do we do? One of the things that I do want to say is let's not focus on perfect. I think in today's environment, if we can get 80% complete or as close as we can come back and fix the remainder. But we're still making progress and we're still reducing risk. So how do we evaluate where we're at? Do we successfully accomplish what we set out to do or as close as we can? And what's the next iteration? So that was step one in talking back to the client and giving him my idea. First of all, is the API. Assess, plan, implement, evaluate. Now, assess piece. All of us have different areas of responsibility, right, in our programs. So, but again, if you look at your program, it's basically divided in what I see to 4 key areas. And one of those areas I don't even show because it is important, but it doesn't have as much priority as these areas. First is crisis management. As we all know, our strategic ability to respond to an event. Number 2, business recovery, the ability, again, of our business to have the advanced preparedness for our business in order to restore the key process to our organization. And last, very importantly, IT disaster recovery, ability to respond and recover from a disruption to our technology. The only item I'm not showing is program administration, which is all of the frameworks, business impact analysis, threat and risk assessment. You know, a long time back and talking with a lot of our colleagues, we used to prioritize and weight each of these areas. And between crisis management, business recovery, and IT disaster recovery, these typically, in our opinion, if we had to weight these by importance, you know, typically these will make up 90% of the criticality of your program. I really believe disaster recovery, if you had to weight between program administration, crisis management, business recovery, and DR, I believe DR has right now probably a 40 to 50% weighting overall. I think that's how important it's becoming. Most of our colleagues see it as a 40% criticality, business recovery 30, and crisis management 20, and program administration 10. So we use that, and that's a way for then you to say, okay, what areas do I really need to focus on? Well, using that, typically we got to see DR first, business recovery second, crisis management third, and program administration I don't even worry about. So that's the second piece of this whole. How do I assess? By looking at each of these areas and then defining which ones I want to work on. So it's very important down here at the bottom. Again, prioritize these areas by importance. Which ones really will give me back the most significant return on investment? Be able to identify the risk within each of those prioritized areas. Make sure that they're aligned, whatever risks we identify, which we'll go over in a second. Make sure that those risks we identify are aligned with our ability to respond, to recover, and resume business. What are the key actions we have to take in order to eliminate those risks quickly? And then lastly, the last two most important, what's the timing? Can we quickly get through that in the next, for example, 60 to 90 days? What are those things that we need to do? Can we do it? And then lastly, who's going to be responsible for implementing that? So very important, remember that. Look at these 3 key areas. You know which ones are critical to your organization. You may or may not have ITDR, but again, this is your first piece. Look at these and look at these in order of priority. So how do we assess the gaps? I'm sure all of you today, those of you out here, you're on this call, you're good practitioners of the business continuity management environment. You know where your gaps are. And I think sometimes what happens with planners is I've been there before I started consulting. Sometimes the gaps we have look insurmountable. How do we fix them? Or as in our nature, we're trying to fix everything perfectly versus saying, gosh, let me identify 2 to 3 or 3 to 5 items in each of these areas that I can get close to correcting and or even correct by thinking outside the box and then reducing risk. And doing this on a repeated basis. In order, over time, we're quickly reducing our risk in a very quick fashion. So if we had to take a look over at crisis management, let's take a quick look here. What are some of the key things that we need to look in crisis management? First of all, focus on the ability to activate, communicate, respond, and direct a crisis. So that's really, again, what are those key things within crisis management where we may have gaps? Are we not good at have the ability to activate our teams? How about communicating, whether it's internally or externally? Are we good at responding to an event by getting my team activated, mobilized? And are we good at directing a crisis? So when you look at those items within crisis management, what are the 3 to 5 key gaps? You may even reduce that number. Maybe it's only 2 to 3. What are those 2 to 3 or 3 to 5 gaps that really are key to those ability to activate, communicate, respond, and direct a crisis? You know what those are. Look at those in a very objective manner, outline them. And then what are the actions that I need to do to correct those? Maybe I only, again, do to 2 or 3, or 3 to 5, which ones makes more sense to you and your resources. But those that I can quickly correct within 45 to 60 days or even 60 to 90 days. By doing this, again, we're looking at those that mean the most and bring back the most return on investment. Probably the things that I've seen in crisis management that need the most work the quickest, the ability to communicate internally and externally through our ENS, call trees if you don't have an ENS, that one is always a big gap. The ability to communicate externally to not only our providers, but potentially regulators and others. Can we do that? Can we activate our team and get them together quickly? Most people don't seem to think that is as critical as it is, or I've got time to do that. You really need to have that ability to mobilize and get your people together as quick as you can, get them on that call in order to start assessing the situation. And lastly, of course, can my people direct the process? Can they direct a crisis if needed? So trying to figure out what those are, and again, can we do it, can we not, and how do we need to fix it? On the business recovery side, I really would like you guys to then focus in doing this in this 21-day, trying to figure out in the next, what can I do, is really focus on those plans that are truly core to your business and its value chain. What really is important? Again, you may have X number of plans, but we all know that if you looked at those X number, whether you have 100 or 50, probably 20% of those plans make up 80% of the value to the company. And really cutting that list down and saying, gosh, you know, it's our plans in the RTOs of 24, 48 that are really core. Which one out of those 3 to 5 out of all those really we could focus on and have the gaps that, you know what, I need to fix right now or have the opportunity to fix. Whether it's recovery strategy or recovery exercises, those areas are the ones we see have probably the biggest gaps. Recovery strategies, recovery exercises. Based on what you find in looking at those 3 to 5 plans that you may say, these are the ones, honestly, that have the biggest gaps that mean the most to the company, look at those actions needed to correct those. And those that we could correct, you know, we can correct in 45 to 90 days. What can we do to fix those? Thinking outside the box, looking at different ways, which we'll talk about in a second. And the same thing goes for IT. We all know, again, IT, especially in today's world, the criticality to the environment, the lack of manual workarounds in the business recovery environment, how critical IT is. And again, using the same approach, looking at all of those recovery plans, but which ones mean the most or which ones have the gaps and also have the value of the company that we need to correct. And taking the same approach and what actions can we do to correct those, you know, in a reasonable time frame, as well as thinking outside the box, which we're going to talk about. So, taking a look at those gaps, now what's my plan? This is where it usually stops a lot of people, because a lot of people, again, they may not have the budget, the time, the resources, etc. But again, there is ways to work around this, to look at this differently, think outside the box. What can we do as an interim measure? Still reducing risk, still documenting information. So building an executable plan that's not necessarily focused on perfect, but making progress. So one, how do we correct the gaps? Getting a few folks, yourself and others together, how do we correct the gaps? And we're going to talk about, again, looking at this differently. Number two, can we get these fixed, not necessarily perfectly in the next 60 to 90 days, but still make progress? Some you may be able to. They may be low-hanging fruit. And then lastly, with all of this that we correct and resolve, will it help heighten our response our recovery and resumption capabilities. So very important, building that executable plan that's flexible, not focused on perfect, but again, based on the risks and gaps that you identified, it's going to make some progress for your company. If you guys would do this once, twice every year and focus on this, it's amazing what you're going to do. It's kind of like when people say with your workout program, how do I do this where I do something every day in order to get myself in better physical condition? This is the same thing. I'm working on those key pieces I know need the biggest help or the weakest link that I can fix. Not necessarily get them at 100%, but gosh, if I can get it to 80% better than it was, I've made significant improvement. So remember at the bottom here, taking that right action, not focusing on being perfect. It's not perfect. Hey, if we get perfect, that's great. But as I always say, perfect's enemy to good, and a lot of times you never get to perfect. So doing your best as close as you can. Thinking outside the box, we'll talk about in a second. So important. You may not be able to have the perfect recovery strategy right now or the perfect recovery exercise, but get as close as you can and make that improvement. Again, timing is important. Too many times we see initiatives and BCM programs take way too long instead of, again, what's the best we can do in the time frame we have. And then next, very importantly, tracking that progress and making sure we are making progress. And lastly, resolving. Maybe we don't resolve in this first go around, but we've gotten 80% corrected. Let's fix the next 20% in the next go around. So, planning and strategy for progress. By looking already at our gaps, identifying them in those key areas, crisis management, business recovery, disaster recovery, putting together that plan as how we want to attack it. We then say, okay, let's take action. And by doing that, making sure, first of all, again, whatever gaps and whatever plan we're coming up with, again, is aligned back to response, recovery, and resumption, that it's realistic, that we can do something to fix it. Again, it's not going to be perfect. That it's progress focused, and try to work at least, some of these may, I might not be able to get to 100, work on that 80% capability. Very important, the next one. Think outside the box. If, for example, if a system doesn't have a full recovery strategy, well, maybe the best thing I need to do right now is create a manual workaround for that business unit, if at all possible, to not only create it, document it, but test it. Maybe a business unit doesn't have an alternate work site that I can pay for right now. Well, what's a hybrid approach that I could possibly implement quickly? How many people could work from home? How many people could work from another building in our company? Think totally outside the box as to things that may work. May not give you 100% perfection, but at least you've reduced the risk by doing that. So consistently thinking outside the box. Could I maybe transfer the risk to somebody else by looking at other opportunities? So by thinking outside the box, you can then quickly move in that 60 to 90-day period and get things in place for reducing risk overall. Next is the timing. Can I get there from here? Can I get in that 60 to 90 days, get as much done? And will I reduce risk by doing it? Don't waste your time on gaps or risks that you're like, gosh, I'm not going to reduce much risk. Look at those that I can reduce the most risk, and again, get as much done in that 60 to 90-day window. And then again, whatever progress we made, something done is better than none. Because I will tell you again, we've seen a lot of programs. Folks are holding things and action items for months. I've seen it for years that things have yet to be done because, again, not being able to think outside the box, always trying to reach that level of perfection versus let me just make some progress going forward and reducing the risk. Now, and then resolution. Over time, you work towards that final resolution on getting these resolved. And most importantly, the end game is protecting the value chain of your company. And also documentation. I had a discussion with a colleague before this presentation, and we talked about even if you can't resolve everything, it's still the great documentation you have. You've identified big risks, you've identified big gaps, and you've made progress and you've documented your efforts towards that. So nothing goes wasted in doing this process. Nothing. So the question will always come up, well, Michael, I don't have the right people, I don't have enough people. So what you may need to do if you're a one-man or one-person effort, maybe you'll need to reduce the number of gaps you can effectively work on your own, but make that your mantra. This is what I need to do over the 60 to 90 days. I'm going to look at fixing maybe only 2 to 3. If you have multiple people in your department, maybe it could be, guys, we're going to work on the 5 to 10 that we know we can fix over 60 to 90 days. This is kind of like being a hotspot team, being called into the wildfire, or being a crisis team that gets called in to fix items. That's what you want. So doing this, look at implementing with the right people in a very focused time frame. It's amazing what you can get done. Being in a consulting environment, this is our life. We get called in. We have a very defined, focused time frame. It may be 60 days, 90 days. We're called in, get the job done, move in, and move out. That's what you need to do that. And that'll be a great help. So in implementing with the right people in a focused time frame, one, you better make sure you clearly define what the gap is, because whoever you have to implement and help you resolve this over time needs to understand, clearly define what the gap is. Secondly, clearly define the action steps, whether that's one or multiple. What is it I need to have done? I need you to come up with a manual workaround for this department in order so that we can minimize the risk till system A is fully recoverable. Or I need to have you come up with a hybrid recovery strategy for this business unit until the alternate work site is built out. So clearly define what those are, and in doing this, who are those best resources you have to correct the gaps? Is it somebody that I could quickly hire from outside to help me? Is it somebody that I have within the organization with my team or outside my group that could help me do this? And how quickly could we do this, and getting those right resources, getting the right people, and making sure that the people, A, are action focused, they're time focused, progress focused, deadline oriented, and then again, getting that risk reduced. Because a lot of times, again, we'll hear from most of the programs, I can't get this done, I don't have the right people. I will tell you, we've seen this work for different organizations that have one person in them. They just know where to focus their time and efforts. And most importantly, in the end, it's about risk reduction. And how do we do that in a repeated manner over time? So, how do we do this on the left-hand side? By implementing with the right people. One of the things, again, is making sure regular status updates and getting this hotspot team focused on a minimum number of risks, which are going to bring great ROI back to us. Having those regular status updates. We're working around the roadblocks. We're making good progress. We're coming up with alternative ways in order to define strategies or solutions or testing. We're reducing risk. By doing this, you're also documenting all this, which is great back to management. And we're working on good, not necessarily perfect, but again, we're still making progress. And then lastly, we're documenting. So all of this working together will help you over time. And in the end, the last part of the API, or assess, plan, implement, or evaluate, is again, evaluating how we're doing. Are we doing a good job? Again, most programs do not have an evaluation program at the end, whether it's a strategy, an exercise, in a lot of cases. Overall, how are we doing? What's the evaluation process? Are we making the right corrections? Are we reducing the right amount of risk? Did we make progress? Did we work around the roadblocks? Most importantly in the end, as we all know, do we have an improved ability to respond, to recover, and resume our business operations, which is really what management really wants to know. So, very quickly remember, assess, plan, implement, and evaluate. Questions? I know this was a very short webinar today. I'm happy to open it up for any questions.
Everybody's unmuted now, I think. I don't know. So I have unmuted you in the system. If you may also have to unmute yourself at your own desktop with the little microphone icon.
Any questions?
It looks like I don't see any.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for your time today. And again, if you do have any questions, please feel free. We'll send the recording as well as we'll send the PowerPoint out. Thank you everyone. Everybody have a great day. And Catherine, thank you as always for moderating.
Thank you.